Welcome back. Now, after weeks of tough negotiations, Ramaphosa has finally announced his cabinet. A large government that encompasses most of the parties in the GNU. Markets seem to have welcomed the move. However, the big question is whether this momentum can be sustainable. And joining us with greater analysis is Portfolio Manager for Emerging Markets and Fixed Income at 91, Adam Furlan. Thank you so much for your time, Adam. Of course, we've seen the air of optimism surrounding the GNU and the cabinet appointments from 2 days ago. What are some of the key appointments that investors are encouraged by here?
Thanks. Good afternoon to everyone. I think some of the key positions actually retained by senior members of the ANC, stuff like Enoch Godongwana at finance, Ramaphosa at electricity, and moving energy and electricity, combining those two will allow reforms to continue in the energy sector. Ronald Lamola into international relations, we think is quite a positive for him as an up-and-comer in the party, and does give him a bit more of a meaningful portfolio. And one that I suppose we're all going to be watching is Aaron Motsoaledi back to health. Particularly given the recent signing of the NHI bill, and we're not quite sure what his position is on that. And finally, I'll talk about Barbara Creasy into transport, quite an important sector for reform, where we're currently seeing that happening at Transnet, within Transnet in Ports and Rail, and will she be able to continue with the momentum they have in reforms on Ports and Rail.
Yeah.
For other parties that have come in, we've seen the DAs given the responsibility for public works and infrastructure. This is an interesting one because currently public sector capex is only around 25% of total investment in the economy. There's allegations of tenders or corruption, local content requirements, for example, or even just poor management holding back some expenditure capex from this part of government, and that might be unlocked under new management there, as well as Home Affairs. Home Affairs also given to the DA, and here we've got things like skills, highly skilled labor shortages, etc., which may improve going forward should we see some change and reform at these ministries.
Quite interesting points that you are bringing about here. And actually, I want to zoom into you talk about the continuation of reforms that were started in the 6th administration. Of course, we know that when we look at the reconstruction of the SA economy, we usually focus on electricity and transport. And I'm wondering if, this is a sign that the 6th administration actually laid a useful foundation that the 7th administration can actually build on going forward.
I think that's a very fair point you make. We've seen, a big reform in the energy sector to date, with a big liberalization of that sector, unbundling of Eskom underway, self-generation, being allowed for, and that is definitely a very good platform to build on. In terms of ports and rail, I think maybe a bit earlier in the process there, but from what we've heard out of Transnet, the decline in volumes, etc., operating has been arrested at Transnet, and now we're looking for a bit more of the public-private partnerships to take form and start to show some operational improvements and results in ports and rails. Finance is the other one that has had some really good work done under Enoch Godongwana. We're seeing, I think, a very pragmatic budget in the lead up to elections, actually an austerity budget, some might call it. And, we've seen quite a willingness for them to, arrest the increase in debt to GDP and start to try and consolidate the debt profile under the current finance minister. And we're happy to see a continuation of that going forward.
Well, on that, talking about Enoch Godongwana, of course, continuing what he has started in terms of fiscal consolidation, how far do you think that, he can steer the fiscus more into positive territory, and also just, sentiment when it comes to the ratings agencies? Do you think that there could be a meaningful shift there when it comes to how they look at, our balance sheet, our fiscus as well?
So I think Enoch's task is going to be made somewhat easier by the potential for reforms in all these other sectors and spheres of government. The increase in business confidence, consumer confidence, as a result of quite a pragmatic and resolution to this national unity cabinet, and that likely over the shorter to medium term actually is likely to increase our potential growth rate, which is going to be which is going to increase the tax take, make our ability to fund ourselves a little bit cheaper as well. So his job is going to be a little bit easier as a result of that. But they already have done some very good work in improving the efficiencies at SARS, improving the tax take in that manner, as well as constraining expenditure to be able to reduce that debt burden.
Well, sometimes it's not always rainbows and flowers. This is a watershed moment in terms of all these different parties working together. Is there any caution that 91 is applying or any risks that you are pricing in terms of how you're seeing this working out?
So, whilst we are, quite confident and optimistic on the outcome of the GNU, that we are going into, a very new political environment in South Africa. We have resolved, the major or past one major stumbling block of forming the government, but going forward, prioritizing policies, etc., amongst a cabinet of different interests and ideologies is going to cause some volatility and potentially slow down some of the reform, and that is an area that we'll be watching quite closely to see how the cabinet is able to work together.
All right. Well, we do have to end the conversation there. Adam, thank you so much for your time and really giving us insights into how 91 is seeing the GNU working out, particularly with the appointment of the cabinet. That was Adam Furlan from 91.